Peace, family. It's been a while. I know it's been a while, but I know y'all see the slideshow in the back. Basically, this segment is to put an end to the Aboriginal community or Native American or American Indian community. You know, the so-called black. You know, that was classified as Negroes. You know, that were that were American Indians. This is to you guys, you know, and, you know, for whoever want to learn something new. You know what I'm saying? But basically, this is the cover. And these slideshows that you see is basically proving that American Indians weren't always American Indians, especially before 1621. And a lot of these memes, you know, that you might see in the the slideshow, even floating around on social media. And some people might think that Moors make this information up, you know, saying that the Indians were Moors, and, you know, you have some publications saying the same thing from Peabody College, right? Peabody University Museum and Harvard. So basically, you know, people think that's made up. So I just wanted to show you that it's not. And it's basically a lady by the name of Zelia Nuttall, right? And she was from San Francisco, and she did an essay, and she was an anthropologist and an archaeologist. And she did an essay in the, I would say probably in the late 1800s. You know what I'm saying? She passed away in like 1933 in Mexico. So she devoted her whole life to this information, you know, that you see flashing across the screen. She was a European woman. And basically, she was pretty good in her craft. And she was so good that she was in Harvard University. All right, that's her right there, Zelia Nuttall, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to read the book where the memes actually come from. Like, this information you see flashing up here, you know, amongst the indigenous tribes of Mexico during the 15th century, they was, you know, basically, you know, Moorish people before they were called Indians in 1621. That's real. That's not made up. Well, at least I didn't make it up. You know what I'm saying? So I'm gonna show you where it comes from.
Standard or headdress. To the distinguished scholar, the late Professor Ferdinand von Hedstedt, we owe a debt of gratitude for the preservation of a unique specimen of ancient Mexican featherwork, which will be exhibited eventually as one of the gems of the rich ethnological collection in the newly erected Imperial Museum of Natural History in Vienna. In 1878, his attention was directed to his former presence at the Belvedere Museum by a notice in Baron von Sacker's descriptive catalog of the Imperial Ambers collection printed in Vienna in 1855, wherein, among rare objects from various parts of the world, it is mentioned as follows. No. 3. A Mexican headdress about 3 ft. in height, composed of magnificent green feathers with golden hued luster and of colored bands of featherwork studded with small plates of gold. This specimen was termed in the inventory of 1,596 of Moorish hat. Guided by this note, Herr von Hedstedt, with the assistance of Dr. Ill, the custodian of the Ambers collection, found the precious relic and rescued it from an obscure corner of a show W case where it hung, folded together, next to a medieval bishop's mitre and surrounded by sundry curiosities from North America, China, and the Sunda Islands. It was, unfortunately, in so impaired and moth-eaten a condition that, to use Herr Hedstedt's words, he feared it would fall to pieces on taking it from the case. Permission was obtained for its immediate transfer to the ethnographical collection, then in process of formation, and the valuable object was placed under the care of Herr von Hedstedt, who proceeded to provide for its future preservation and to investigate its past history with the following interesting results. 1. Its earliest record, dating as far back as 1596, was found in the first inventory of the Ambers collection written 1 year after. One of these were published in Herr von Hedstedt's treatise Über Mexikanische Reliquien der Zeit Montezumas, in 1884, from which I have derived this and further valuable data. 6. Mexican Standard. Demise of the Archduke Ferdinand of Tyrol, the founder of the collection, by the Imperial Commissioners appointed to revise his will. 1 on folio 472 of this ancient document, it is cataloged with other objects and featherwork contained in a chest note. 9. It is described as a Moorish hat of beautiful, long, lustrous green and gold-hued feathers, bedecked above with white, red and blue feathers and gold rosettes and ornaments. In front, on the forehead, it has a beak of pure gold. The term Moorish, as here applied, can scarcely be regarded as a deceptive one inasmuch as Montezuma, the king of Tenochtitlan in Mexico, is designated as a Moorish king in this same inventory of 1596 CP 9. It is interesting to note the gradual changes that occur in the wording of the subsequent periodical official registrations of this Moorish hat. In 1613, its description was faithfully reproduced. In 1621, the word Indian was substituted for Moorish. With this single alteration, the original text was again transcribed in 1730. In 1788, however, a remarkable transformation was effected. The hat became an apron, and the official record reads, an Indian apron of long green feathers. It is garnished above with a narrow band of white feathers, followed by a broad one of green. Then there is a narrow stripe of red and a broad one of blue. The bands are studded with crescents or horseshoes, small circular plates, and other thin gold pieces. The old inventory designates this object as an Indian hat. This last sentence proves the identity of the specimen described. The beak of pure gold on the forehead is not mentioned here, and no subsequent reference is made to it. It probably found its way to the melting pot during the years intervening between the two registrations, sharing thus the common fate of almost all of the much-admired goldsmith's work brought to Europe by the conquerors, despoiled of the gold beak and possibly of such means of attachment as may have originally served to fasten it. It would seem as though the object had been deprived of that which characterized it as a headdress, for it remained an apron. 1 Ferdinand Roman II of Tyrol 1529-1595, whose name is indissolubly linked with Indian, was substituted from subsequent periodical official registrations of this Moorish hat. In 1613, its description was faithfully reproduced. In 1621, the word Indian was substituted for Moorish. With this single alteration, the original text was again transcribed in 1621, the word Indian was substituted for Moorish. With this single alteration, the original text was again transcribed in 1730. In 1788, however, a remarkable transformation was effected. The hat became an apron, and the official record reads, an Indian apron of long green feathers. Pronounced by a scientific authority, Dr. Fitzinger, to belong to the tribe Pavaninas, the Quetzal of southern Mexico and Guatemala, restored to light by Herr von Ichstetter after 23 years of oblivion. The use of the elaborate and precious piece of featherwork became the subject of thought and conjecture, resulting in recent publications of widely divergent individual opinions. Mr. T. Mailer, a resident in Mexico, traveling in Europe, saw the object in Herr von Ichstetter's custody shortly after its restoration and obtained his permission to sketch it. Herr von Ichstetter mentions on page 6 of his treatise his subsequent surprise at seeing Herr Mailer's sketch appear in a French periodical La Nature, No. 300, Le Mars, 1879, accompanying an article by the same gentleman entitled Undegment Royal de l'Ancien Mexique, and containing a number of misstatements and inaccuracies. These are reproduced in a brief notice by Mr. Mailer, also entitled Un Rapage de Plumas, inserted with a colored reproduction of his sketch in the Annals del Museo Nacional, Tomo M, Mexico, 1886. One of his mistakes, however, can be traced back to the writer of the printed catalog of the Ambers collection, published in 1819, and we will assume that Mr. Mailer's odd and misleading Spanish translation of part of the misapplied German text taken from the above source is due to an oversight in proofreading. 1. Other errors are more serious, such as the inaccurate proportions of his sketch and his hasty identification of the species of birds whose feathers were used, as he supposed, in the manufacture of the object. In the text of the above article, Mr. Mailer gives the accurate length of the central portion of the feather piece, 1 meter 5 centimeters, but on his colored plate the measurement printed is 1 meter 50 centimeters. I draw special attention to this error, evidently another misprint, because I noticed that in the review the original quotation is Ein Mori SCH feather pushing so ein boss off die stern gel, meaning a Moorish feather tuft like those used as plumes on horses' heads. Sent publication Mexico at Traves de las Siglos. The incorrect measurement is reproduced with Mr. Mailer's sketch on page 805. It is probable that the exaggerated dimensions thus assigned to the object led the writer of the above work, Senator Alfredo Chavero, determined a rich feather mantle with gold ornaments, differing thereby from Mr. Mailer, who assumed that the garment was intended to be worn about the waist as an apron. Finally, another and novel interpretation of this most interesting relic has been given by Herr von Hofstadter. At the conclusion of a careful and elaborate treatise on this subject, he expresses his belief that this ancient Mexican piece of featherwork is a fan-shaped standard or banner that once belonged to a military dignitary of highest rank at the court of Montezuma, possibly to the unfortunate emperor himself. On reviewing the history of this remarkable piece contained in a series of records extending over a period of nearly 300 years, we find that in its original perfect condition it was explicitly recognized as a headdress and was minutely described as such, and this primary appellation surely constitutes of itself a testimony deserving to be most carefully weighed and tested, for it was written down at periods separated from that of the conquest by an interval of only 75 years. Thus that
yeah, so basically, when they tell you that, right here, when they say scarcely is like barely. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it means basically only just or almost not. You know what I'm saying? So, the way they're using it, the term Moorish, as here applied, can almost not be regarded as a deceptive one, right? So scarcely means almost not. You know, it means like, for an example, her voice is so low, I can scarcely hear what she is saying. So it's basically barely, like I can barely hear what she's saying, right? So the term Moorish, as here applied, can barely be regarded as a deceptive one, right? So it's not saying that it's deceptive. They saying it can barely be a deceptive one. It can scarcely be a deceptive term. They don't know for sure, you know. But all I know is they definitely call these Indians Moors, because they just off the rip called a so-called Indian king a Moorish king first. So I'm not saying that the Indians or American Indians called themselves American Indians. I'm not even saying that they called themselves Moors. But what I will do is say that I know that the colonizers, when they came over here, they called them Moors. They didn't know that they were American Indians. They didn't call them that first. They called them Moors, Moorish, because they straight designated Montezuma as a Moorish king in 1500s. So this went on all the way up until 1621, and when they stopped using Moorish, and they just started using the word Indian. They replaced Moorish, but this ain't India, you know. And that's about it for that.